Welcome back. We are in the final video in this series on Christians and money. And this is my absolute favorite topic of all, charity. In the work that I do here at Profitable Stewardship Inc., my goal is to help those that I serve be more, have more, and give more. Because when you have more, you can give more. And that giving is even more joyous because it is not coming from a painful place. Guys, the only place the Bible talks about sacrificial giving is giving back to God. Everywhere else, it talks about giving joyfully. If you have two coats, you give one. It's never asked us to sacrifice, lose, and do without to give to a fellow person. In fact, there is a parable of the women, the brides who had their oil and some didn't. And when the bridegroom came back, there were 5 brides that did not have their oil, and they're like, "Hey, give me some of yours." And they said, "No, we need ours. Go go and get yours from the market." And of course, the doors were closed, and Jesus said that he didn't know them. So that kind of giving is not supposed to happen. So sacrificial giving is definitely there, but that sacrificial giving is to God. For everything else, we're talking about charity. And guess what? There is definitely a lot of verses in the Bible about charity, but I selected this one because I really felt like it summed up what all those verses were speaking to. And that was Proverbs 19:17. And God is saying, "Whoever is generous to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will repay him for his deed." Guys, God doesn't need our money. He really doesn't. I mean, what you going to do? Send it on a spaceship up to heaven? No. So when we give, really, it's a discipline that we're experiencing, and we're just acknowledging our resource because everything we have came from God in the first place. So what do you do with that increase? What do you do with that extra? You can be generous to the poor. But this is exciting because the poor can't pay you back. This is not a debt to be repaid. This is just giving. And no matter how poor you are, if you can give something, you feel very, very rich for that moment because you can only give from a place of having. So if you have and you give, you're not a have not at that moment. You're a have. You have. So you're giving from a place of having. And when you give from a place of having, whether it be time or resources, for that moment you feel extremely rich. And this is an experience. So yes, the poor may benefit, but I promise you, the benefit is even more to you. At least it is in my experience. When I give in that moment, it meant that I was in a position to give because I understand the dynamics of being a good steward. And I'm being very, very careful about being a good steward. But I understand the concept of giving and lending to the Lord, because really, that's who is benefiting. These poor people are receiving, and the Bible says, "I'm lending to God." When you lend, guys, let's go back to lending. Remember, we talked about lending earlier. When you lend, okay, you're likely to get back something in return, and often with interest. And if you lend to God, oh my gosh, come on, people. When you lend to God, the return is beyond what you could ever fathom. So forget the poor person for a moment. They're just a conduit. That's just the process. It's your being willing. You're having a motivation of generosity and being willing. And then understanding that when you give, you're lending to God, and God is the one who's going to repay you, not that person. Oh my gosh. This is the most exciting part of having money in my mind. It says, "And he will repay him for the deed." God is going to repay us, not the poor person. Okay? In this case, this is all about you receiving back. I promise you, it may seem at the moment that you're giving, but if you do it the right way with the right heart, because trust me, God can read your heart. God can read your heart. When Samuel went to anoint one of Jesse's sons, and he was picking Eliab, the oldest and most handsome, God said, "Don't pick him. I've read his heart." And he chose David. God does not look at the statue, he looks at the heart. And I can tell you, there are people who will make sure that that donation gets blasted across the news. I gave $10,000 to this charity. That is all the thanks they're ever going to get, an earthly thanks. They may feel good for a moment, but I promise you, when you lend to the poor, don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. When you lend to the poor and you do it with the right motive, you are lending to God, and God is going to repay you. And I promise you, I have watched this in my life over and over and over again. This is different from tithing. I probably should have added a topic on tithing. So I'm actually going to add one more video, guys. I'm going to do one more video, which is on tithing. And this one is about charity, giving to the poor. So I actually am going to add one more video. Thanks. Bye.